Faye. Just want to say quickly, thank you so much for the privilege to host one of these panels. I have tried to pop in and out of a lot of them for the week, and it's been really fantastic. I really wished I had had every single day that I could have taken in every single word said. There's been so much information and just the richness of it that relates to so much of what we are doing in business and what CCGI, and others are attempting to do with corporate governance in Trinidad and Tobago. It's never too late to draw in new companies and new businesses who, for some people, I think the concept is still a little bit alien in this country. We are way behind in certain things, as well as we are advanced in certain areas. So just jumping straight in, because I know time is limited and discussion is rich to come. So I just want to welcome our one panelist. Having read and gone through the bios in the agenda, like I'm sure most other people have been, it's no doubt going to be a rich vein of information that we are going to gather, keeping the trend going for this entire week. So I want to introduce Dr. Annette Rahael, Family Business Advisor, Trinidad and Tobago. Andrew Boyle, Chairman and CEO, Eureka Labs, Guyana. I'm not sure if he's logged on as yet, but I'm sure he will shortly.
Oh, he is.
Okay, great. Welcome. Marguerite, Orane, Coach, Family Business Consultant, Canada. And I love that we're spread over the regions. That tells us how much we have in common, being in different parts of the world, for I suppose a common cause in terms of helping Trinidad and Tobago and the region to get us act together and bringing some kind of standards to corporate governance in the region. So I want to jump right in and ask Annette to launch into her presentation, because I'm certainly looking forward to hearing about her experiences.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you, Joanne. Well, first of all, I was really disappointed to hear this morning from Kamala that the Family Business Day and the Corporate Governance Week is one of the least attended ones. And we're really going to have to do something about that. And I endorse what Dale said in the last session, Dale Parsons. I don't know if he's on this session, about somehow mounting a campaign so family businesses understand the need for the balance between entrepreneurship and some process and structure that corporate governance brings. Now, earlier in the week, Kenny Atai in one of the sessions spoke about the difficulty in family businesses where often the family issues spill over into the business and vice versa. I like to say, so we sometimes make the bedroom the boardroom. And before you get to having an effective board, you must have proper family governance, not just corporate governance, not just business governance, but family governance. Family governance is critical for creating a bridge between the business and the family, and drawing boundaries between the business and the family, so that there are procedures and protocols that govern how the family interacts with the business. And this really becomes critical as you move from the founder stage to what we call the sibling partnership, where perhaps there are different branches, brothers and sisters owning the business, and then one generation down into the cousin consortium. And of course, being a family business consultant, I'm all about moving the business from one generation to the other. I don't buy into the rags to riches, back to rags story. I think we can have continuity in family businesses. Certainly there are businesses all over the world that are hundreds of years owned and oftentimes managed within the same family. So depending on the complexity of the business, you may have a family enterprise board, and below that you may have specific family business boards pertaining to different subsidiaries owned by the family enterprise. But the family governance will first set up all kinds of policies which address the way the family will conduct its business within the family business. So for instance, things like family member employment, role of the in-laws, a dividend policy, a buy-sell policy, agreement, how to even choose a board for the business. And of course, I think somebody spoke earlier about the family council, which really is the board of the family, as it were. And in the same way that you have a board charter, You have a family charter that has these list of policies that we all agree upon. This is how we're going to conduct things, right down to succession planning, philanthropy, their whole list of things. It depends, again, on the complexity of the family, the complexity of the business, the size of each. Now, all family businesses have a board. It's a legal requirement. You have to have 2 directors, and that makes up a board, right? So when I go through all of the family governance and I get to the point with the owners, and I say, listen, we need a board, they say, but we already have a board. And the reality is that the new family businesses, when they've started, they usually just have a board of 2 people, usually it's husband and wife. It's a rubber stamp, right? Or in time, as the business grows, they may bring on executives who work in the business onto the board, but it really is an executive management team. For some whatever reason, they like to create these directorships that are not really external to the business. And then they say, okay, you know, we've had all these people who work in the trenches, let's go bring some external people. But they're really talking about the lawyer and the accountant who works for the family business. To my mind, that is not independence. A truly independent director is one who has no connection, a financial connection, is not employed by the business. You can have an advisor that's employed by the business. And I tell my families, if you want to get legal advice, go pay for it, right? Bring people on your board who, as David said in the last session, could help your business grow and develop. So when I mentioned the thing about bringing external directors on, I get a fair amount of pushback, right? First of all, well, you know, everybody, our business is so specialized, nobody could really understand everything we do, and they will have to take a long time to learn the business, and they cannot contribute unless they understand the intricacies of the business. I like to tell people that, listen, you know, I'm an advisor. I have some experience in business, but I don't have experience in a lot of different kinds of businesses. But I can advise because I understand business. Financial oversight, strategic oversight, HR, operations, all those things are fairly standard with regard to what are the protocols you put in to have a business that run effectively. So I say to them, listen, your business is not that unique. You can get people, if you onboard them properly, they will learn enough of your business that they can contribute. Then they tell me, well, you know, we don't have the proper systems in place yet. You know, our software isn't that good. We don't produce good financials, or they wouldn't be in a timely fashion, or we wouldn't be able to give the kind of reports a board wants. And then I say, well, listen, you obviously are getting some reports. You're running a business. It's been running for decades. You obviously know what's going on in your business. So it may just be one step to formalize these reports, but they do exist. They say, well, you know, where are we going to find trustworthy people? And this is a very big one, because how do we bring people onto our board? They will talk our business, they will steal our ideas. And I've heard a couple of horror stories where that has happened. But by and large, you have a lot of people out there very willing to give up their expertise, give up their advice, and help develop business and family businesses. Because 80–90% of the businesses in the Caribbean are family businesses, and the most of them were formed really after World War II. And if we don't plan for continuity and succession, we're going to lose business within the Caribbean. Because if you look at it, there are very few industries that are dominated by non-family businesses. Okay, maybe the financial services, maybe insurance, but everything else, manufacturing, distribution, and now even insurance is dominated by family businesses, and we can't afford to lose any businesses. So then they say, well, all right, then, but can we afford them? How much remuneration would we have to pay an independent director? And I say, listen, it's not going to break the bank. Yes, we have to have some remuneration. And usually I say, listen, let's just pay the external directors. Maybe do not pay the family members, right? And of course, the question of which family members to have or not have, because the complication arises to when you have 2 generations or 3 sometimes working in the business, when you have what the literature calls active shareholders versus passive shareholders. And this passive is a term I really like. I should really replace it. But active shareholders are those who work in the business. Passive shareholders are those who do not work in the business but own shares in the business. And then there's further complication. I think somebody earlier on spoke about it, where you have within a family business, family members who are working at different levels. Some of them may be executives, some of them may be senior managers, some of them may be junior managers, some of them may be working anywhere else. So you have all of these family members in different positions. And if you really want to have an effective business, you have to have first the family governance that governs all the criteria of how the family will work within the business and how the dividends are shared, what role each family, each part of the circle has, the owners, the shareholders, and so on, what role they each have in the family business. So then they give me all these excuses about why they cannot have this board with external directors. But the real reason is what I call SAP. You have stubborn family business owners. What do I mean by that? Especially the founders. They have done it this way for 40 years. They built this business from nothing, and this is what has worked over the years. And you bring external directors to maybe give them a different way of viewing things. I don't know if it was this morning or earlier in the week, somebody spoke about that they tend to hold on to their ideas. So what you really lose is the ability of these fresh eyes and clean ears that an external director could bring. But if you have family members who have a cataract vision and wax in their ears, you know, because they're holding on to the way things were always done, you really don't have room for an effective board. So that's the S. The A is accountability, lack thereof or fear thereof. Family businesses are not keen on holding family members, especially, very accountable. Particularly, founders are all star boys, right? So if the founder is still around, the founder doesn't really want to be questioned too much or held accountable for whatever he or she says they're going to do. And then when they have the children working in the business, they either go one or two extremes. They're too lenient, so there's no accountability, or they're too harsh, right? And the child, the next generation is treated as a child rather than a mix of an employee as a child, because that's what they are. So the accountability of how do we introduce that? Because that's one of the jobs of a good board. It will hold the business accountable to whatever plans they put out there. Or else why bother to have business plans? Why bother to have strategic direction if you're not going to hold yourselves accountable to achieving some of what you say you're going to do? And the third one in my SAP is power. Family business owners like to tell me, well, if I bring a board in here, they will take over my business. They will tell me what to do, and I am not one for that, you know. And I say, look, a family business board, any business board will never hijack you. They're not going to hijack the ownership. They're not going to hijack the direction that the family wants the business to go in once they have been appraised of that direction, right? A good board with worthy independent directors really will do things like ask you difficult questions to allow more information to come on the table, because the more information you have, the better the decision making will be. So this is some of the roles really that a good set of external directors can bring. Rollins this earlier on spoke about process, and yes, family businesses, maybe some of them have had the exposure of serving on other boards, some family members, or they have gone to business school and read up a little bit about it. But the reality is, yes, they do lack process, even within the board. Somebody else spoke this morning, I think, about corporate secretaries, about not really wanting to spend the kind of money to have the kind of fully trained corporate secretaries. So they're not always aware of the process. And it's important that you do put in some processes, because remember, what you're doing is setting a stage for generations to come. This is the way we do things. So the next generation will have learned by osmosis, hearing about it or being exposed to it in a very formal and structured way, the way we do things around here and what is entailed in running a business and having proper governance. Now, a family business board, like any other business board, will bring the usual benefits, financial oversight, strategic planning, HR. Ronan gave us a whole list this morning: adherence to regulations, compliance with OSHA, a lot of important things that are needed for any business that wants to grow and expand. They will also bring two very big features that are critical to family businesses. And David spoke about it earlier, the question of removing emotionality. If you have a board where you have a couple of external directors who are viewed as objective and have an analytical brain and bring some good advice, and are not viewed as taking sides with one person, whether it's the senior generation or the successor generation, or it is between members of the successor generation, they bring a level of objectivity. And that removes emotionality from decision making, because it no longer becomes my idea versus my brother's idea. It becomes what is the best idea for the business. An independent director will be able to remove himself from some of that bickering and under the carpet baggage that usually comes with family members serving in a boardroom. My job is to try to get them to drop the baggage at the door, leave it on the family governance side and try and deal with it there. But, you know, I tell them sometimes I'm going to become like Spirit Airlines. I'm going to charge you for hand luggage. You're coming to a business discussion, don't bring any baggage in, but it must come in. You know, feelings seep and leak into everything. So that's the first thing that I think there's a lot of value to having an effective board with external directors. Secondly, succession planning. It is one of the most difficult areas a family business can face. The founder may have multiple children in the business. The children eventually, third generation, they come in. And there's always a competition about, you know, running the business and what positions are available and so on. A very good effective board will have a proper succession plan in place so that they will identify what are the skills we want in our successor, and therefore they're able to help guide the business into choosing the right person, whether it's a family member or an external CEO, and maybe one or the other. And we are only now in the Caribbean beginning to put in external CEOs. Roland, you're one of a handful in the family businesses I know within Trinidad, even outside of Trinidad, trying to think, some of the other islands where I work, where the reality is that they still like to have a family member in charge. And, you know, it can work, provided, as we spoke earlier on, about a well-trained and well-prepared. So if I can get them to say, okay, fine, let's make this board more effective to bring in external directors, well, then we start. What size? I usually go between 7 and 9. And the next critical thing is, what is the ratio of family members versus non-family members? If you do not have at least, if you have a board of 7 and you do not have at least 2 or 3 external directors, you're leaving somebody out there to hang. Having one external director on a board is a very difficult thing for that person. He or she needs some company to move things in the direction they need to. So I like to say, look, as much as possible, you work on it. You're not going to start immediately having 5 external directors or 3 family members, but you work towards that, right? What are we looking for? We are looking for people with skills to help the business grow and develop. I know Jane spoke about, you know, you must have somebody from operations or HR or so on. I say hire these people when you want it. A good board will tell you, hey, you need a good HR consultant in here to put in some good systems. Hire them, pay them, and bring into your boardroom people who can help you grow and develop the business, other business people who maybe have done something that you want to do by running their own business or running a business for somebody else. Or if you feel, look, we really need process, or we really need to be good exporters, let's find a business that has learned how to become good exporters and bring that person in, because they will bring the experience that the business needs to move it to the level you want it to go to. So the needs of the business determine the people you put on the board. And of course, everybody, the buzzword is diversity, right? Look, I'm a woman. I would love to have more women serve as executives. I would love to have them serve as CEOs of businesses. I would love to have them in the boardroom, right? But if you give me a choice between, if I'm advising family businesses, between gender diversity or age diversity, I'm going to go with age diversity, because my eyes are on the next generation. And they have to be comfortable that the people running this business, they can identify with some of them. They can trust this board because maybe, you know, 2 people on the board know what Instagram is. You know, and I don't, by the way. I don't use it at all. But the point is that you've got to appeal not to the next generation, that the people on the board are not just FOBs, friends of the boss, you know, their dad's friends or whatever, so that they understand that they can identify with these people. Then, of course, you go to a candidate search, and there are a million ways to do this. I think Marguerite will be speaking about this later on, but I like to involve as many family members as I can. and say, listen, you know, toss out some names if we know the kinds of people we're looking for, and do not leave out the passive shareholders. They're moving in circles as well, where they know people. And then I would say, okay, let's rank them, and then we approach them and have a dinner with them, whoever wants to do the pitch and so on. Now, in terms of the actual process of a board, yes, I think you need to have a board charter. You must have some guidance, you know, the frequency of meetings, the kind of documents, when do we get reports, when do we get minutes, and so on. But for me, the most critical thing when you do a board charter for family business board is to ensure that you have a rotation policy. Because you can end up, especially if it's the first time you have an external director, and you bring someone on, and you realize within the first, let's say we give them 9 months to settle. Within the first 18 months, they are not a good fit for whatever reason. Some people are professional directors, they're too busy, they're serving on too many boards, they didn't take the time to learn the family dynamics, they're not interested in getting into a little bit of the mediation role that they may be called upon. We need to have a very easy way of rotating people out without looking as if we're singling out somebody and saying thanks, but no thanks. So I insist that whatever you do in a board charter, for me in family businesses, put in a proper rotation policy and seek to apply it even to family members. As, depending on the size of the family, you do have other family members that you may want to bring on. Board committees, yes, depending on the size of the business, and every business will have a different need for a committee. So Roland, you spoke about risk management, all good. People speak about audit committees, all fine. But for me, if I had to choose one committee for family business board, I want an HR and compensation committee. Because, you know, it's very difficult in family businesses to set compensation for family members, but you're really setting compensation for the roles. So if you get a HR committee that has an independent director on it, and you get good advice, then they realize that we're tagging this to market value, whatever the policy of the business is, right? And an HR and committee will remove some of that emotionality that always surrounds money, unfortunately. And it also will help with the succession planning, not just for the top CEO, top gun position, but for down the road as well. Because one of the problems with a lot of my family businesses is that we have wonderful employees that have come up through the ranks. A lot of them are what we call legacy employees. They've been around 40, 50 years, and nobody ever, and you know, there's no enforced retirement age. Because if you have an enforced retirement age in a family business, the family members suddenly don't want it to apply to them. So there may not be an enforced retirement age. So we have to start planning for, you know, making sure that there are people coming up in the ranks who can take this role. Because I have had family members and non-family members in senior positions die overnight on me in family businesses. And they have just not been prepared for it. And finally, I guess people talk about, you know, board evaluation, and CAMLA and CCGI have a lot of tools, a lot of courses about it. And fine, you know, whether it's self-evaluation, questionnaires, all good and proper. But let me tell you, a family will know if they're getting value out of their boards, of their family business board. It's great to have all these mechanisms, but the value will show. The proof of the pudding will be the eating. And I think maybe, I don't know, Kamala, is my time up thereabouts? Yes, okay, I've gone on too long. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Annette. That was a virtual shopping list for my business right now. So I absolutely glued. I love that you got into a lot of the psychology behind the family negotiating, and I love family governance. Not to be obviously confused with, but in combination with corporate governance. I think just the dynamics of how you got into it, for me, was just a fantastic, very practical, solution-based presentation. So I want to ask Marguerite if she'd like to weigh in on Annette's presentation.
Sorry, you're asking me?
Yes, you.
Caught me off guard there. Yeah, I agree. It's certainly quite a laundry list of what a family should be doing in terms of building an effective board. Indeed, I think it's just basic good governance, whether you're a family or not. And we have to remember that many of the businesses that we consider non-family were once family. And for, over time, they've emerged into being, more widely held. So we have to remember that it comes from that. I wanted to add, though, some my perspective, perhaps from someone who actually grew up in a family business. I was born in a family business. My parents started a business. The story is my dad got fired and went home. And for 3 weeks, he was in a depression and then got up and decided to start his business. And I think that may have been a good 5 or 6 years before I was born. So I grew up in this family business along with my 2 siblings. My mother was also in the business. And a lot of what I've learned has been from those formative years. I must tell you that at the age of 23, 6 months out of UE, management studies, knowing absolutely nothing, my brother, who was running the family business at the time, called me and said, hey, I'm going to Harvard Business School to do my MBA. We need somebody to run the business. So now we're into 2nd generation, right? We need somebody to run the business. And I think you would be the best person. And, you don't really say no to your older brother. So I did. And it was literally quite a baptism. One of the wonderful things about that experience was that we had a very small board. It was mommy, daddy, brother, and 1 external director. But that external director made all the difference, not just to the success of the business, but to actually the success of the family. And I really credit him with just, first of all, with keeping me sane, as I was actually my father's boss for 4 years. That's a whole nother story again. But also keeping the business focused, keeping the family focused on the business, and making sure that the family did not disintegrate. So when I mentor people who are starting up businesses or in family business, I always say, and even when I taught family business at Mona School of Business in the MBA, I always say from day 1, have a board and make sure you have at least 1 external director on it. It just makes all of the difference. In the previous session, I think it was David O'Brien spoke about this thing about being counselor. Well, I think when an external director comes on the board, you have to be prepared to become, if not maybe more than counselor, almost therapists, in terms of really being there for the family members who are in the business. And it is invaluable for external directors to lend a listening ear, but without getting involved and embroiled in the family squabbles, and just keeping everyone focused. The second thing is that the family must be clear on the vision, the aspirations, and the values for the family. Annette spoke about that line between family and business. We've got to be clear on that. And therefore, the whole idea of the family circle is one I totally endorsed. I remember facilitating a client, their strategic planning session with them. And the day before, it was all family, but the day before was just to talk about the family. And the matriarch who had actually started the business, she stated clearly, she said, listen, whatever happens, the family must prosper. And I thought that was so powerful. And I've seen it operate with this particular family, to have this kind of ethos and this stated ethos. The family circle should be formalized, if you will, certainly meet at least once a year, include all the family members, even the little children, let them run up and down, have ways to resolve the family disputes. And I think a very important consideration with the family circle or structure is to make sure that the well-being of the family is not totally dependent on the business. In my family business example, up until the day we sold the business, which I should speak about in a moment, our family home was mortgaged to the business, and everything my parents had was wrapped up and committed to that business. And if that business had failed, I don't know what would have happened to us. Of course, that was great incentive to make sure the business did well, right? But I really urge family businesses, as they're looking at this effective governance, to make sure that the welfare of the family is not totally wrapped up in the business, at least not forever. In the beginning, it probably will be, but over time, you want to make sure there's a plan for that. And there's something else that the family should also consider. We've spoken a lot about succession planning, moving to the third generation. But I think there's something that should always be considered. This whole issue of harvesting. Is there a time? What about that option of selling the business, of releasing it to somebody else rather than the family grappling with it? So we did that with my family business. It was the best decision the family ever made for the family. And I just think it should always be something that that families consider very consciously. When the family is clear on its vision and its values, and the values are crucial because the values of the family become the values of the business, really. You know, the values of the founder tend to be the values, the core values of the business. Then I think there's a process where when you bring in the external directors, they must understand the family. They really should understand not just, you know, who the family members are, but what are these values? How does the family see the business? What are their aspirations for the business? And so, you know, the whole issue around really listening and understanding, and then from that place, being able to guide the family, the business, and the directors with in terms of their role on the board becomes very clear and exceedingly powerful. So I think those are just three considerations from my experience. One, growing up in a family business, starting 2 businesses with my sister, and consulting with family businesses over the past many decades. You know, have the board from day one, consider the family separately, and also make sure that the external directors really understand the family.
Thank you so much, Marguerite. I like that yours marries so well with Annette, because I like that you're getting so much into the mindset and this psychological orientation, which is where a lot of the problems, well, most of the problems are, because most times we defer to emotion and not common sense. I want to ask Andrew, before he starts his presentation, if you wanted to weigh in on anything that Margaret said, that, you know, will contribute to the conversation.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I don't have a presentation per se, but I'd just like to discuss my experiences really. And I think those 2 presenters were pretty spot on. And I love the idea of what they're promoting, to have the directors. In my case, in my businesses, I am the CEO of owner of 3 businesses actually. And we only have 2 directors on each one of those businesses. And they're extremely successful. Down the line, I'm aiming to have, of course, a succession plan. My kids are relatively young at the moment, and they're in university. So the plan is to have one of them take over the reins at some point. And there's no consideration at the moment of having external directors. As Annette said earlier, I think the owners or founders are relatively protective. So that's exactly what happened in my case. So those are little things I would like to add, and maybe I'll discuss a little later on, how it started and so on. But I prefer to field questions.
Okay, fair enough there. Annette, would you like to weigh in a little on Marguerite's of it, because so much of it marries with what you shared with us?
Okay, the question of relying on the operational business, Marguerite is spot on, because, and you will notice the experience of a lot of family businesses in the Caribbean is they have an operational business and they're accumulating wealth, and often they end up putting it in real estate as a hedge against the operating business. And I encourage it. And now we're moving away from real estate. Now I have the hot shots coming out of the business schools, and they want to go and invest in stocks and bonds. All good, because she's right in terms of separate. And the thing that you spoke about, Marguerite, it drives me crazy when I'm in a family business and I know the marital home is mortgaged to the business. That's one of the first things I want out of the business. I am always about that. The question of harvesting is, look, in family businesses, succession is not the only option. You can go public, right? Have an IPO. Right now in Trinidad, there's a lot of incentive to be able to go join Junior Stock Exchange, a lot of tax incentives, and that may give them the stock exchange, but what will keep them there is when they recognize the value of having independent shares, values of shares and so on, so they can go public, they can sell the entire business. A lot of businesses will do what your family did, Marguerite. You sold the operational business, but you remained a bit as a family enterprise because you started businesses with your sisters. So they may sell the business and invest in something where they're passive investors, but they stay together as a group to invest. Because, my father used to put matches together and show us, look, very easy to break one, but you put a lot together, very hard, strength and unity. So I fully endorse all of that. Andrew, I am curious, you obviously have some very successful businesses. You said you have 3 of them. You have 2 directors. You say, I'm assuming the second one is your wife. Yes?
That's right.
Right, okay. Your kids are not that young. University is not that young. When I work with family businesses, I bring them in very early and start to teach them about the business. So I'm curious about a couple of things. What has stopped you from expanding your board? Is it the SAP I spoke about, the stubbornness, the power, the control, that you're afraid? Was it that? Was it the lack of trust? You're scared of any trustworthy people. You don't have the time, you don't have the energy to invest in putting up a board. So that's my first question. What has stopped you from expanding your board? And I mean, I commend you. You obviously have very successful businesses, even without these boards. What has stopped you? That's my first question. And my second question is, what have you done to date to prepare your university-age children to perhaps join the business and, as you say, take over?
All right, good. Great questions. Let me see if I can answer the first one. I would say it would be a 3-faceted approach there. One, to find qualified persons who are trustworthy, and that's maybe a slight, but I think being stubborn is one of the major reason there. Being stubborn, basically. And I find also, and I'm actually on 2 boards, and I find also there's the external boards. I find that somehow, and you may disagree with me here. In some cases, boards take too long to make decisions. In my case, I need to do something. Of course, I not do something that is going to be damaging to my businesses. I need to make decisions. I make decisions right away, and I guess boards, in my opinion, in some cases, they take very long to they go around the corner, go around here, there, and sometimes you need to make quick decisions to benefit your business. The other one, to have my kids, they're no special preparation. They're all in school. They're all studying overseas. And some of the problem is that this, as most Guyanese would say, whether your kids are going to come back to Guyana. That's one of the major issues. But so far, they're all aligned in, one is doing psychology, the other one is doing management, and the other one in medicine. So they're all aligned to some extent. So eventually, I don't see any issues with them taking over. But I have to do a proper system to have a proper, maybe all three being in charge to some extent.
Yeah. Andrew, I want to ask you if you can share with us a little bit more about what your businesses are, because I understand you're founder for, is it all three of your businesses?
Yes, I have Eureka Medical Laboratories Inc. that has been around for 26 years. This has been extremely successful. One of the biggest lab in Guyana. We have branches all over the country, and we have as far as in St. Vincent. There's another one that's basically family oriented. It's Amazonia Farms, because my father was a farmer and I grew up on the farm. So I have Amazonia Farms. It's been done for my hobby, basically. Amazonia Farms, it does eggs, and that's relatively successful as well. And there's a solar company, Caribbean Wind and Sun, because all of the companies, all of the entities are not fully powered, but I think up to 80 and 90% powered by solar. So those are the three companies. And I'm also part of a joint company with Eureka, which is my laboratory, and a Canadian company that's Caribbean, Eureka Atlantic Medical, EAOMS, Eureka Atlantic Offshore Medical Services, which is a merger between Eureka and Atlantic Offshore Medical Services of Canada. So those are relatively successful.
So I thought it was, as unlike a lot of the other businesses here, you're one of the few that is actually the founder. Yeah. Business. What I wanted to ask, and this might go to Annette until we get some questions in, and other people feel free to hop in on the jump in on the conversation, is that how do you get those family businesses emotional ties to it to get them to even think in terms of IPOs, going public, or making the next move? Because there's a comfort level, like myself, I mean, I'm just a tiny business, but where you become very comfortable with the fund, with how the funds are flowing more with it because it's flowing nicely. But of course, succession planning, children, how do you convince, for those businesses that you advise, and Marguerite as well, how do you convince them shift to the next level?
So the first thing I have the greatest of respect for with my family business clients is that their business is there for them. And my role is to help them to see as many options as possible and to assess those options and decide which is the best fit for them. If they have a high level of need for control, for example, becoming a minority shareholder may not be the best thing for them. So they do an IPO and become a minority shareholder. I have seen entrepreneurs build amazing businesses, do that and become minority, and it does not work out well. So not everything is going to, there's no one size fits all. So it's really around helping them to see, okay, what are all the possible options? And you have to be patient. Annette, I don't know about you, but you have to be patient. I mean, I have a client that I've been working with since 2006. Family business, very successful in Jamaica. And it's just in the last 2 years, they're like, oh, we have a board now. We have external directors. I'm like, really? Right? Because, I've been recommending this from 2005, 2006. And they're saying, yes. And oh my gosh, they're invaluable. I'm like, I told you so. So you have to exercise quite a bit of patience, because that stubbornness we see is also because they have been successful and are successful. And what has made them successful their success has actually reinforced the way they behave, right? So it comes across as stubbornness, but it's just like, no, I've been successful doing it this way, and so why should I change? So it's a really, really a process of really being patient. Andrew, I must tell you, in terms of the children, I remember many days there, you know, children are never too young. I remember mommy picking us up from school, prep school, and putting us in a car and taking us down to the business. And we'd sit there, and those were the days when we used to pay the workers with cash. And our job was to count out each worker's pay and put it in the envelope. And I mean, we just grew up in the business. It is never, ever, ever too early to just get the children to see what daddy does. Let them understand, and also let them understand that, hey, you know, you're in university and wherever. Why? Because of what daddy does with these 3 businesses that I've successfully built, right? So to develop that sense of responsibility, so that when the call comes, as it did with my brother, as it did with me, as it did with my sister, that, you know, the business needs you, you go.
I see you itching.
But I want to endorse what Marguerite said about, you know, when you're young, and usually it's the founder. I mean, I grew up in a family business as well. And from 8 years old, I was working in the business. So we got as a man, Andrew, and you're right in terms of, if you want to get the next generation involved, you've got to have some kind of system, whether it's a management training program, whether it is that you tell them they have to work outside of the business, whether they have to do internships, whatever, they have to have the exposure. Now, with regard to your question, Joannah, is that how you say your name? Joannah, right? Look,
Yes.
Look, you have to pay attention to different types of wealth in a family business. The operating business must be successful. There must be wealth accumulation, but there must be something called socio-emotional wealth. We accept as family business advisors that there is a certain attachment to your business. Emotional ownership of the business is important. All the generations coming up, there's a lot of pride, a lot of legacy issues involved in it, especially someone like you. You've started off the business, you're all alone. You find it very difficult to open it up and consider moving to a different level where perhaps you lose some control. Now, I never endorse minority shareholdings at all for family businesses. It never works. Right? So even if they go public, they're going to hold on to the majority of the shares. And even if they don't, they do like the Toyota family and hold on to a golden share. They may own 30% of the shares, but they have the final say. So, you know, it will not work because that level of giving up control, Andrew Boyle will never do as long as he's alive. But what I get them to understand a bit of is, look, if you let your ego take over this business and control of this business, I tell them, you want to give your children the best, right? You want to send them to Harvard, right? Harvard does not take ego for payment. Harvard takes cash. So what you need to understand is you need to grow this business, whatever it takes to give wealth to the shareholders, whether they work in the business or not, right? But if you're so invested in it, that is all about what I say, my ego, right? So I just let them know that the supermarket doesn't take ego for payment, neither does Harvard Business School, neither does Europe when they want to go on a vacation. So they need to put in their mindset is, how do I create the most value out of what I have built? And look, yes, value is some degree of legacy, some degree of socio-emotional wealth, but it is about cold hard cash as well. So I get them to understand, I put that to them and they mull it over.
I see a comment here from Susan Morgan, where she says she agrees totally, less screen time and encourages ideas of youth into the business. But I want to take a little liberty, Dr. Bertrand, into the conversation because I see him shaking his head, and I can read from his face that he has something to say. And so I'm gonna ask you weigh in on.
I just wanted to respectfully challenge Andrew's assertion that boards hold up that decision making. I think that there have been studies, academic studies that debunk. I call that a myth. You know, you can set up governance structures that allow for anything. All speed of decision making in emergency circumstances. CEOs can make decisions, round robin. There are so many mechanisms for fast decision making. And the idea that a board is this slow, dinosaur that holds back the entrepreneurial spirit, I think is something that I wish to challenge and suggest to you that is not necessarily the case. You can set up an effective board that could support you and support your making a decision. You're an entrepreneur, you see an opportunity, and I would suggest to you that having a few independent directors that you could bounce things off of, and even after you make the decision, assess whether you could have made it in any different way, could add tremendous value to your business.
Andrew?
Yes, no. That's what I said. That's why I said it will cause a controversial statement, because as I said, I am on 2 other boards, and I see how they operate, and I tell you, it's a perfect waste of time, because they take so long to make decisions. It's crazy, and I totally agree with you. If I were going to go have a proper board. And I like the idea of bouncing things off of individuals. I totally agree with you, okay? But as I said, my experience with others would have caused me to say that. So indeed, if I were to set up a proper board, it'd be something that will have all the systems in place so that decisions can be made in a jiffy.
Andrew, are these boards that you sit on, are they family business boards? Are they government boards, government agency boards? Just what type of boards?
One is an insurance board, and the other one is a private sector thing, financial thing, but not family. It's just,
there you are, my friend.
Yes.
Couple things. Both of those are heavily regulated industries. They're scared of the shadow. You know that. They're scared to make any kind of decision because the regulators on top of them.
Right.
And they may be, I don't know if they're public or not, but a family business board that is more vibrant and doesn't have all those restrictions, you will find far more useful than your experience. I mean, I served on before the worst. I hope nobody here is involved in government. The worst is sitting on a government committee or government board. Talk about bureaucracy. I mean, after 18 months, I threw in the towel and I said, thank you very much, Bam Bam.
Totally.
I understand, I empathize. That's why I want to know what was your experience like.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
The other thing, Andrew, is so interesting is, you know yourself so well, and you have this need for quick decision making.
That's right.
Therefore, as Rollin was saying, you have to structure your board and choose your directors and make it clear to them that, look, this is how I am. No apologies. This is what has made me successful. I need to make decisions quickly, and I need a board that is responsive, no dinosaurs on my board type of thing. And I agree with Rollin. You can get an amazing board and you'll come back to us and say, gosh, you guys were so right. Why didn't I do this before?
I totally agree with you. Yeah. All right. If I may, I think Kamala had asked earlier, what are the reasons for my success? I would say it would be because of I have amazing teams in all of I've been probably very lucky to have amazing team members in all of my companies, and I think that's the reason for the success. I mean, clearly, so that's my answer here. Yes.
I just want to share. I think Andrew's been very modest, and I will tell you this because of my experience with him. How I first met Andrew, he was doing his MBA at the University Nations in Guyana, right? And of course, as we had discussed before, if you were a teacher, there's so many faces that after a while you don't keep track. But what made me stand out with Andrew was the fact that I just heard some of his colleagues in the class approach him and they're like, Andrew, after having learned about, growing companies and taking it to listed status and all that, they were like, Andrew, when are you going to make Eureka Labs a listed company? Because it's so successful and they want to be able to purchase shares in it and all that, And I was so impressed because here it is, other people in Guyana has seen and appreciated the work that he has done. More than that, the level of trust and confidence they had in him. To say that whenever he is ready, they want to invest in the company because they know that how well run it is, you know, and that it's going to continue to be very successful. So Andrew has a formula that works. Now, I know it is his wife, you know, who is on the company with him. They're both professionals, both in terms of, is it as a scientist, Andrew, or it was medicine or something like that?
Yeah, that's right. Medicine, I'm a microbiologist.
Yeah, both of them, you know, and then he went on to do management so that they themselves are equipping themselves with the level diversity of skills to be able to make those kinds of decisions. And I want to help us also see this other side of the coin, in that when your business is in these early stages, in terms of you're still the founder and it's your passion and it is your instinct sometimes, you know, in terms in how you make decisions, it is it can be a little bit difficult to see that if you had someone advising you, you know, because that other person may not have the skill and experience that you are looking for. And I think that was one of the things Andrew shared first as well, that when you look around to see who may be good board members, finding those persons with the skills that may match, you know, his needs in his business would be one. But I at the same time also want to share, Andrew, that I agree, the kids are not too young. However you bring them in, you know, because it's perfectly okay for them to live in other countries. And that was also part of the wonderful example given this morning by Liz, how that company was structured and how family members were moving around different countries for their studies, and how they still were able to structure it in such a way, you know, that family has done so successfully. So hopefully at this point, we are also looking at the next step, you know, for
Well,
Thank you.
that said, Andrew, there's no other country in the Western Hemisphere with the opportunities that are opening up for you guys in Guyana. Get them back home. Get them back home. Whatever they're studying, it's gonna hear outside and work if they want to. Let them bring some first world quote unquote experience back. But let me tell you, the opportunities that will be present to them now in Guyana, right, is where they need to be. And there's something I do want to say about the next generation. I tell all my family businesses, I don't care what they study, they're going to come back, somebody will circle around. The hairdresser may go out and work for 5 years, or the psychologist may go and work in the hospital in Guyana for a couple of years and say, wait a minute, what am I doing here, boy? I have a boss driving me crazy. Nothing I say they take on board. They give him a pittance, and I have a business that I could go work in. So it doesn't matter what they study, right? Ultimately, the exposure to business may make them, and you obviously want to have a legacy business. You want to have successors. So that's right. What it says. And the bureaucracy of boards, you will learn, as well, we just spoke about, dissipates when you have a good active family business board.
I wanted to ask of the panelists here, and when we talk about in terms of talked about family governance versus corporate governance, how is it in a family business? Are you bridging that gap, the next generation, with any semblance of corporate governance? Because it's becoming a really essential part of business operations in the world in which we live today. And of course, COVID is pushing us along a lot faster than we would like. How is it, and I don't know, between Annette and maybe Marguerite and even Andrew, something for you to think about. How is it that you're looking to bridge that, the whole concept of corporate governance into the next generation of board members? Family, in terms of family.
Next generation of family?
Yeah, well, family who is likely to end up being board members, you know, for any family business.
Yeah. So one of the beautiful things I find about young people, the younger generation, is how aware and how responsible they are. They are seeing a world, they're looking at the world a lot different. They're seeing the environmental issues. They're questioning how the whole capitalist system and what business means and what the role of business is. So I find that they're very, very open, at least the ones that I deal with, even if they're not yet in the family business, they're pushing their parents to become more responsible in terms of their governance, their contribution to society, and so on. So I did hear talk about the next generation being entitled. I really would not paint that generation with that brush. That's not been my experience. I think they are extremely concerned about the broader world that we live in and the role that the family business, they're very eager for the family business to play a bigger role. I'm not sure if that answers what you're getting to, Joannah.
Children so far?
Pardon?
No, Andrew, is that your experience with your children so far in terms of the next generation?
I think they're my kids are relatively keen to some extent. But remember, they're so busy studying. When they come home, we're just to have fun and party, and so they're not so much. They're of course involved to some extent because, but not fully, I would say. But I love their ideas. Sometimes they talk a lot of. They're very much into IT and those kind of things. So they're encouraging in that respect as well.
I saw Annette's eyebrows shut up when Marguerite was talking about the whole level of, or the absence of entitlement, and experience was entirely different. I have a sneaky suspicion Annette may have been exposed to something else.
Well, look, the reality is, and I don't want to talk too long. I like to get some of the audience to pose some questions. The reality is that, yes, my father slept in a tree, we grew up in a 2-bedroom house, all 8 of us. Well, my nephews and nieces each have their own bedroom, their own television, and their own computer in it. So yes, that's the price of progress, right? As you go from generation to generation, there's more wealth, but it doesn't necessarily mean entitlement if you can instill values in them, right? If you can make them understand they have to work a bit for what they have, and if you expose them to a wide range of people. What do I mean by that is, if you bring them into the business and they learn to respect every position in the business. Mm-hmm. So, but the truth is, yes, there's some entitlement, but I tell them, hey, it's not an obligation, it's not a birthright. You have to earn the right to work in this business. And you have to instill that in them from when they're very young, right? That this is not automatic entry for you.
I want to invite any of the participants, I know you're listening in because it's fantastic storytelling as well. But if you have any comments and questions, you want to plug them in now, or you even want to do a audio comment, please feel free. Mr. Bertrand, I saw you fidget a little in your chair a little while ago on the same comment in terms of the next generation, whether it is as Marguerite experiences a little opposite from Annette, entitlement versus those who are not seeing themselves as entitled. Dr. Bertrand?
Yes, well, I mean, without being too specific, and the function that I am carrying out at the moment, where I am at KC Confectionery, there is the whole question of prepping the next generation, making recommendations to prep the next generation for succession, because clearly, if the succession was on track, I would not be the CEO at this point. There would be the 3rd generation in there already. Mm-hmm. So there is a gap. There is a significant gap, and entitlement. That generation that grew up with ease and not stress is definitely showing itself in some of the potential candidates who believe that they should take up the role of CEO sooner rather than later. And this is resulting in somewhat of a challenge, not only for myself, but also for the 2nd generation who comprise the board. And these are some of the conversations we've been having about not only dealing with entitlement syndrome, but also the whole question of what kind of program do we structure to ensure that the next generation, we can't just put them off indefinitely. They do have an age profile that means that they can pick up the reins of the organization in 5 to 7 years. But what do we do to ensure that they will be ready? And if they don't have the right attitude, I don't know that they will ever be ready. So no, my experience is of course not as diverse as somebody like Annette, who has had many clients across the Trinidad and the region. So I'm speaking from a very limited experience. So, and also Marguerite as well, maybe the clients that you have dealt with, you don't see that level of entitlement that I see in this particular case. But I just reflected on Nigel's comment at the start, where he mentioned the absence of stress is a key ingredient in the kind of drive and passion that the next generation displays in terms of taking over the reins of this.
I want to just I just want to acknowledge Chairman CCGI Nigel Romano, who is with us. It's lovely to have you. I know you can't make all the sessions, so I'm happy you made ours. I'd love for you to weigh in, especially now we've shifted to next generation corporate governance.
No, I've been listening since 3 o'clock. So and it's been a very engaging conversation, and I must say I am not surprised at the quality of Annette and Marguerite's presentations, and of course Andrew's experience. The question I had, and I'm actually coaching a second generation as they try to, because the father said, look, I am tired, I need to stop this nonsense. And I am coaching them to really take over. One of the things that you find is and I'd like to hear from you all. These organizations are growing to a certain size where you need to bring the rest of the organization into your confidence and agree with them. This is what we are about. Because I can tell you a lot of the pushback I get is I ask, so this person here is in your finance department. Why aren't you giving her more work to do? Why aren't you bringing her into the conversation? Oh, she's not capable. And I asked, well, how do you know that? Because I spoke to her and she sounded quite capable. This other person has been with you for 20 years. Why aren't they engaged with you? Because their lives are as much dependent upon this organization as yours. So why aren't they in the conversation about? So Jack Welch had, I'm a big Jack Welch fan if you know me, but Jack Welch had a saying that he met one of the guys in General Electric, and the guy told him, he said, for 20 years you used my hands and you could have had my brains for free. And the point is, why aren't we engaging in conversations as opposed to dictating? Now, this is not only for family businesses, by the way, but family businesses, I believe, have a unique opportunity to engage with their teams, especially organizations with people working for that length of time, because they are in effect part of the family. So I would like to, that's the question I would like to get from you.
Marguerite?
That's a big question, Nigel, and I agree with you. It's confined to family business. We need to recognize our history here. The history of the Caribbean, the plantation, and all of that, where it was, people were hired for their manual labor, and we do that. And I think much of that has just been brought, just sort of generationally along with us. Now we'll be getting a little more, exposed, and we started to think about it, and we started to recognize it. A part of it is lack of trust. We just don't trust each other, because on the plantation, you didn't trust people. You know, that's how order was maintained when the overseer and the owner was vastly outnumbered by the workers. That's how you maintain order. And I think that that is what has come through. I think that COVID, the pandemic, is an amazing opportunity to really shift the way that we manage and lead our businesses. And I'll say particularly in family businesses, because as Andrew says, you know, if he wants to implement something tomorrow, he just implements it. That's why I love working with family businesses, because, you know, we have a workshop today and tomorrow, yeah, Marguerite, we did this and it really, really worked. I think this pandemic is just causing people to rethink not just their business, but their life, how they lead, how they interact with people, what's important. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity, Nigel, for you to help your client just stop and really ask some fundamental questions, you know. And I will go back to things like sort of existential questions. Are you really happy doing this? Are you really happy leading in this way? You know, is this really what's behind this belief about why you're treating people in this way? What is it you're believing about them? Really, because people are asking some serious questions about themselves now.
Annette?
Marguerite, that's profound, and that's something that you could consider doing. Dr. Bertrand Rollin. You cannot rewrite history. Huh?
No,
if you have some big black men and women in front of you, decades old, because you say that's where they are, and they have grown up with this great sense of entitlement, and nothing has been done before to disabuse them of that notion, you have a serious issue. And the only way I could see there is that you need the business has to have, the board has to define what they're looking for in the successor, and that has to be published almost. And among all the competitors, because there will be competitors, the third generation, you have cousins and whatever, the recognition will come. It may, hopefully it will come, that they just don't have what it takes, especially if we impress upon them, this is not about being in charge, this is about making money for the family, yourself included, Mr. Stakeholder, Mr. 10% shareholder, whoever you are. So keep your eye on the ball here. It is the best person to run the business, not the eldest, because you know we're not primogeniture in the Caribbean. It's gone out of style, but that's something we inherited from England days. Not necessarily the male, you know. So we have to get them to understand where their bread is buttered, so to speak.
Andrew, I know you still in terms of small board preparing the children, but I'd like you to weigh in on this, because I'd like to hear, because it in terms of looking at the future of growth of your companies.
But in my case, as I said, the kids are studying, and I've pitched it to them a few times. Here, somebody got to take over this company, you know, these companies, and they all have it there in their subconscious, I guess. So they say, look, this is a possibility. My daughter is showing more intent in that. She's asking questions, and she's, you know, I think most likely she will. But it has to be thought out carefully. But I'd love to have all three on board. They're not necessarily that they're because they're family, and I love it to be continued in the family. Not saying that if you have an external or two wouldn't hurt.
May I comment?
Yes, yes.
I just go back to Nigel's observation about his experience with coaching and the pushback with respect to sharing of information and bringing people on board in terms of more collective decision making. I would agree with Marguerite that it is a cultural phenomena in the Caribbean linked to our history and the whole plantation model. I'm a strong subscriber of that a lot of those legacy models in the way in which we manage are still with us today, because we have not made a conscious effort to remove them, to dismantle them. And I have the same experience as well in this organization, trying to share information. We're talking about sales and production and all of that, cash flows and all of that. Let's put everything on the table, and the more minds we can bring to the discussion, the better. And I see the surprise, in some cases horror, that, how could we be? We've never done that before. The CEO used to do, he is the only one who did that. We would all bring the information to him, and he thinks through the entire process. So now I've been having to tell them, well, many minds are better than a single one. And whereas, especially for someone coming into the business for the first time, I want to hear from as many people as possible so we can make the best possible decisions. But I think that it is a phenomena of family businesses more so because, that was the culture of the founder, made all the decisions, and then over generations, the second generation adopted that, and now the third generation believes that they must be the custodian of all information and make all decisions with respect to the business.
I have one question that's not too far off topic, but for the companies where you have your founders running, and I'm not saying in the case like Niger, but where children show no interest in coming into the business, and it's been operating as a family business, so it might be you, the husband, or you, the wife, whatever. What happens in a case like that when you have everything in place, but you have no next generation from your family?
Well, I think you better think long and hard and very quickly about what you're going to do. Unless, because you're in a very precarious position if everything is solely dependent on you, and if something happens to you, then you're gone and there goes the business. But if you're concerned about the continuation of the business, I guess there are two things. One is the succession plan. Find people like Robin to come in and lead your business, put in place a professional structure around the business. The other is to make the plan to maybe sell the business. Those are the two that I would have on my plate, and I would be advising this person to really do that, because listen, we ain't here forever, and life is short and uncertain, so we better plan for it. Yeah.
What about, I want to propose a suggestion, and just advise me. How about a board that would be active in knowing and understanding, so be that assist with that succession planning in the event that owner is incapacitated in some way, or at that point when it's time to pass on? Is that a possibility that, you as the founder, owner, active and very involved, but not another generation in place, but to ensure longevity, and of course to ensure that all your liabilities are addressed in the event something happens to you? Would you recommend that a board that can be intimately aware of the issues in the business?
Well, I would always recommend a board. So that person needs to have a board that would help them to help him or her identify those options and get them going post haste. That's a very precarious situation to be in. I don't know, Annette, you ever had any of those?
You have to have a contingency plan if you're a sole operator, and it depends, and the two options you suggested, Marguerite, are always on the table: sell, or can this really continue without my presence? Can this continue without a family member presence? It depends on the size of the business, the kind of business you have, what kind of a team Andrew has set up. Can they really take it forward? Do they have enough of the secrets of the business? Do they have enough information? That kind of thing. It depends on the size of the business, and what you see as a founder. You have to ask yourself, what do I really want here? Do I want to build value where my family could benefit from this? It doesn't necessarily have to be that the business continues for them to benefit from it. A sale at the right time is a wonderful benefit, especially if they say they're not interested. But you need to give it a little time too, because I keep saying they go off and they come right back. Next generation, give them a little chance. Keep taking their blood pressure and stay healthy.
I know which is sort of the timeline. I could listen to this all day, okay? Unfortunately, we can't. So I want to just give each of the panelists a minute to round off in terms of some closing remarks and any sort of, for me, I see myself as a participant in terms of someone who's also benefiting from the great ideas, concepts, and material that I can learn from. So any parting comments, and we can start with Marguerite.
There is or can be a lot of joy in having a business with your family involved and all working together. I don't want us to leave with us feeling that, oh, it's tough. Yes, it's tough. But there can be just so much joy and laughter and the feeling of contribution and building in having your family in your business. And so I really think that this day has been so important in helping and guiding family businesses in putting in place the structure, not just for the good governance, and the longevity and the wealth of the family, but also just the well-being of the family. I can tell you that in my family, we were not involved in family business together anymore, but so many of our memories, wonderful memories, are of working together in the business, as a business, with our parents, building things, feeling proud of what we have created. So it can be joy. We just need to focus and do the right things.
Andrew, your last 1 minute with us.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much for this opportunity. In my case, as I said, I really want to work to keep it in the business, in the family, and but I'll certainly have to look at a succession plan more seriously, and that's something today has given me a wake-up call. In fact, at one point we were on holiday, all of us together, and I was saying, suppose something happened, so something adverse had happened to us all. But indeed, there's need for a succession plan, and I would encourage other businesses to have proper boards in place. And yes, I'm going to take some of these ideas on board, and who knows, my businesses will prosper more than they are presently. Well, thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. Annette?
Joanna, I want to say that I want to endorse something David said in last session about recognizing the value of families who operate a business, the founders, and the entire family ethos that builds businesses. And family businesses used to get a very bad rap.
Yeah.
It was always the corporate businesses that would added value to the economy and so on. I think there's a realization that, hey, that's not really so, that the family businesses are adding value, and they're not all exploitative of their employees, and they are giving back to society. So a day like today really puts the focus on the importance of family businesses, and we have quite a long way to go, really, to get society as a whole to recognize our value, as the family businesses to recognize their own value, and therefore put things in place so that these businesses continue over and beyond the usual 75-year lifespan. There's an association in the world called Les Sédokiens. It is a French word, and it is talking about family businesses that have been owned and run by the same family for centuries. It's a select group, closely held businesses, and it puts light to the thing of family businesses disappear after 3 generations. That's not necessarily so. So there's all kinds of governance structures on the family side and on the business side, whether you go public, whatever, that allows you to keep it in perpetuity. And that's, of course, what I live for.
I want to before I toss to Kamala, for Kamala to close off, I wanted to say thank you so much to the panelists. I love stories, and I'm sure a lot of the participants, the lessons from the stories are obviously what we take away. But having a mind of a journalist, I tend to recall whole stories to want to be tempted to go write them again. I won't. What I've just found fascinating, and all three panelists tied in nicely to it. Annette started off really fantastically when she talked in terms of the foundation, the sibling, and the cousin consortium. So I think we made the full round and came right back, in terms of the succession planning and overall corporate governance into the future. So I want to say I also benefited a lot, because a lot of things I haven't done in my two little businesses, and I feel a little bit chastised, not traumatized yet. And so I too have some lessons that I would take away from this, and it's been really valuable. I want to say thank you to CCGI. I look forward to next year's conference, because I think from what has happened this year, and as the whole direction of business is changing so very rapidly, next year we'll probably be looking at something in an entirely different frame and fashion. So thank you so much, CCGI, for this opportunity. And I will toss back to Kamala to close off the session.